Hello and welcome to Campaign Chronicles, France 24's regular countdown to the presidential election. Now, with 13 weeks to go, the contest is getting ever more exciting. Coming up in the show, in the thick of it, or above the fray, what exactly does centrist Francois Bayrou want? President Sarkozy wants major reforms, but is that too little too late? And in faces and places, they may be the legal busybodies behind property sales, but notaries are human too. Well, we begin this week with one man who should be delighted. Francois Bayrou has been warning for years now of the pitfalls of overspending and budgetary wastefulness. And his rising poll figures reflect his consistency. But are voters really ready to accept the candidate from the extreme centre? France 24 went to meet him.
This is Francois Bayrou's first major campaign rally. In the month since he entered the race, he's doubled his poll numbers and is riding high at 14%. Vindication for his dire warnings about France's growing debt, but a chance to pin the blame on the ruling class he used to belong to.
This country's rulers, from whatever party, have become them. They don't listen, they don't understand. We don't understand what they say and what they do.
Part of Bayrou's appeal, then, is his stance outside the current system. That's popular with voters weary of the status quo.
He's the candidate for the people who've been left on the sidelines for the past 30 years.
This problem about left and right, that's more of an issue for high-ranking politicians. But for lowly people, the ones who work, that doesn't concern them anymore.
For the past decade, Bayrou's political journey has been a difficult one. This is his third bid for the presidency. In 2007, after getting over 6 million votes, he dissolved the old centrist UDF party to replace it with his own democratic movement. 5 years ago, Bayrou was pretty much the only major politician to warn about the impending debt crisis, meaning voters now take him seriously.
They know I saw what was happening and that I warned them about what was going to happen.
That's part of why Bayrou says he's a credible alternative to the big parties who have governed France for decades. And rather than simply a centrist candidate, he says his role is central to France's future.
At heart, the French don't recognize themselves in the duel between Nicolas Sarkozy and Francois Hollande. And the longer this goes on, the more we'll see. They want a different way of doing things.
Not being part of the system, then, is key. Voter disenchantment is rising in France. That's good news for Bayrou and others that tap into the protest vote, like the far-right's Marine Le Pen. Polls indicate the pair could get over 30% in a first-round vote that is increasingly seen as a four-way split.
For people that feel they've been excluded from society and politics, it's not completely outrageous for them to consider two candidates who can also say they've been excluded from the political sphere.
That growing prominence means Bayrou is increasingly seen as a serious contender and not simply occupying the middle ground. As more and more voters look for alternatives to the mainstream parties, France may be stuck with Bayrou for some time to come as his face becomes a fixture on the front pages.
Well, I'm now joined in the studio by Campaign Chronicles reporter Luke Brown. Hello, Luke. We're well into the last 100 days of the campaign now. Things are hotting up as President Sarkozy ups the rhythm.
Yes, it's been a very busy week here in French politics. It's probably the way Nicolas Sarkozy wants it. He had his crisis summit about jobs on Wednesday. He used that to outline some of the reforms that he wants to make or implement before the end of his mandate. His enemies, of course, they do say that he never sees any of his reforms through to the end. That could again be the case, unfortunately, perhaps for him, as Parliament could yet stop any more of the controversial reforms that he wants to make.
Now, why wait so late?
Well, that is exactly very much the key question at the moment. Usually, the first 100 days is when you make the impact. Nicolas Sarkozy is rather doing the reverse to that. He says that the gravity of the current situation is such that he can't wait until after the election itself to act on unemployment. That does sound a bit rich, according to his adversaries, François Hollande, Francois Bayrou, who you just saw. They say this is too little and too late.
And what does this show about his record in office, Luke?
The problem for Nicolas Sarkozy is that his fate and his record is tied to the global economy. That is currently not looking so hot. He's been basically moving target strategy to avoid being pinned down and defined by what has happened around him. That does help shift attention away from many of his failures in office, be they fundamental, that 12-year high with unemployment, as well as perhaps the personal, his bling-bling style that's never really sat that well with French voters. It is, though, in keeping with his style throughout his presidency, which has, of course, been that hyper-president, overactive, ultra-active on all fronts. For Sarkozy, perhaps that is important. He thinks that could well be the recipe for his success. We do know that he's a redoubtable candidate. We saw that in 2007. In 2012, is that going to be a strategy for more successful Nicolas Sarkozy, or is he going to prove to be a one-trick pony? That is up to the voters.
Well, now it's time for a wrap of the week's news with the presidential candidates who know they haven't a chance at the vote, a culture shock for a celebrity magazine, and a bitter memory comes back to haunt Nicolas Sarkozy.
A symbolic visit for the socialist candidate Francois Hollande. Accompanied by the party boss Martine Aubry, he was at this steel factory in the east of France. Back in 2008, Nicolas Sarkozy had vowed to keep the plant open, a promise that the president couldn't keep. But despite the apparent united front, the socialists kept up their internal squabbles. With the manifesto still not yet unveiled, the left of the party still isn't happy about some of the candidates' spending promises. Hollande has demanded the rebels tread the party line or risk sabotaging his campaign, a message echoed by the former candidate Ségolène Royal.
I don't think it's good that the socialists argue in public.
They're little known with little chance of victory, but the number of marginal candidates keeps rising as their programmes add to the electoral mix. François Asselineau wants France to leave the EU, the Eurozone and NATO, while Nicolas Miguet, in his third presidential campaign, has just one priority: cut taxes. The youngest candidate is student Maxime Werner. So far, he says he's on track to make it onto the ballot. The 22-year-old says his goal is to get more young people into government. Now, it's not exactly a match made in heaven. Firebrand left-winger Jean-Luc Mélenchon, known for his disdain for gutter journalism, interviewed by gossip magazine Gala. An incongruous appearance as the far-left candidate continues to make a name for himself beyond the traditional media outlets. Voters find out more about his childhood in Morocco, as well as one surprising ambition. After politics, he wants to write a romantic novel.
Well, time now for Faces and Places, France 24's weekly rendezvous with voters. This week, we're headed to the Dordogne, where our host is Lionel. He's a notary who has more work than ever, as a new law makes it cheaper to buy and sell houses now. But he's more concerned about what the future holds for his 7 children.
Si on avait signé après le 1er février, vous n'auriez pas été exonéré comme ce sera le cas en signant aujourd'hui.
Lionel is about to have his clients sign off on a new house. This notary says the months leading up to a presidential election are usually quiet, but this year it's different. Thanks to a new property tax, Lionel's clients fear even further tax rises.
We've seen several new financial laws imposed, and now there's a growing number of clients who wish to sell their property, while the current tax system is in place. They fear that in the near future, taxes will rise and there'll be more penalties as a result.
When Nicolas Sarkozy first became president, he proposed the idea of a unified system under which notaries and lawyers would be one and the same thing. Yet it was never implemented. Lionel feels relieved. He says the French notary system protects property owners primarily against foreclosures, as seen in the United States during the financial crisis.
In the US, a large number of foreclosures have been carried out using unreliable title deeds or following less than rigorous procedures. Such a situation here is just unconceivable, because the notary delivers verified and reliable title deeds. And he also gives his clients advice on whether they can afford the property.
A father of 7, Lionel is also preoccupied by the future facing his children. France's growing debt worries him deeply.
If the government was just merely investing with the intention of a good return, then it would be a good thing for my children. But with the social security deficit, this debt isn't something they will benefit from. On the contrary, they are the ones who will have to pay it back. And I think there's a certain injustice to have them pay for a current standard of living when they will be told their lives will be more difficult.
But for the time being, Lionel's children are blissfully unaware of all of this, being watched by their father who simply wants the best for his family.
Well, that's all we've got time for in this edition. Do check out our webpage or our Facebook page or even Luke's Twitter account and let us know what you think. That's it. We're back in around 3 minutes with the news.